Wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone. We are here with Mr. Andrew Lyons, author Andrew Lyons. How are you today, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well. I appreciate you taking some time to chat with me today. Definitely awesome supporting this channel we're getting going here. So I'm glad you're here.
I'm excited about it.
Yeah. So I have a lot of questions for you. I have your profile pulled up, was looking into researching. You've ghostwritten 40 books.
Correct. More than that, actually, now.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, it was probably that was probably a few years ago when that was written, right? Like,
A few months, actually. Yeah. I churn those out pretty quickly. So yeah,
interesting. Is
for
that what you were
sure.
doing as like a full-time career, or like how do you manage the time to do that?
Yeah, actually, I used to work in entertainment, and I on the side I wrote my own books,
Okay.
and I also worked with this company ghostwriting just like a couple of books a year. And then my the company I worked for, the entertainment company, basically laid everyone off in our entire department.
Wow.
And so I went to the people who I ghost wrote for and said, I have a little more time on my hands.
Right. Like, hey, if you got a second story or something, I'm available.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
they ended up just giving me a whole bunch. And so that's kind of what I do full time when I'm, not writing my own stuff. I'm ghostwriting these books, and that's my primary source of income.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I guess the goal for all of us is right. Like, how do you go from like I'm a person who writes books to I have a career in writing books? So you've certainly found a pathway, and I won't get bogged down with it just because I obviously want to talk about your direct work.
Yes.
But the ghostwriting thing has always been very fascinating to me. So, like, how you get started or how you bring someone else's story to life. I've always been very curious, but um, I don't know if there's anything you want to say for a minute on that, and then we'll get.
Yeah, sure. I find it's an interesting process because you're not sort of it's not your vision.
Mhm.
But I've been lucky that I have a lot of freedom with the folks I work with, and they sort of give me broad strokes of what they want. I can safely say without saying too much that they're in the thriller genre.
Okay.
And so I have a lot of freedom within sort of the outline that they give me for each book to explore the characters and add serialized elements. So it is I wouldn't say it's as creatively fulfilling as writing my own stuff, but definitely I feel like I get to kind of put my stamp on it.
Right.
And to get paid to do that is something I'm not going to complain about.
No, if you can get paid to write and do the thing you love, and obviously, your own books that are your own passion is, gotta be. I imagine someone who ghostwrites a lot. You're like, okay, you know what? It's time for my story. At some point, you're like, I got to put my own on paper. But it sounds like
Absolutely.
instead of like a massive collaboration where every sentence they're checking it, they kind of give you the outline and they're like, hey, run wild and do your magic kind of thing. So,
For sure. Like initially there was a lot more oversight, but
right.
after about like I'd say a half a dozen books, when they're like, this guy seems to know what he's doing generally and be turning in stuff that we're cool with, they gave me a lot more
We
freedom.
trust your
So
judgment. You meet your
yeah,
deadlines, and we'll just let you do your thing. So I
exactly.
won't get bogged down with that. I want to move into your story. So currently, you have three books. Looks like your most recent, you're working on a new series. Um, I did want to talk about Darkness in Him really quick because that seems like a lot of fun. Yeah. So that was your debut, correct?
Yes, that was my debut. It came out a while ago now, and that one was actually published traditionally.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and it's Darkness in Him. It's as the title might suggest, it's in a very dark story about a college student who's on the verge of going to law school. He's in this fraternity. He's got a wonderful girlfriend, and then he makes a bad drunken mistake. He ends up having a one night stand, and this accident occurs, and it looks like it's going to derail his entire life. And he decides that he's not having that, and he's going to do whatever it takes to make sure that his life is not derailed. And so that's kind of the focus. It's I would say if you're familiar with A Simple Plan
Private
or
Plan.
Talented Mr. Ripley.
Yeah.
It's in that vein where sort of the main character is someone you hopefully, if I did a good job, you find yourself rooting for, even though you absolutely should not be.
I love those moral conflict stories. I saw one, it looks like the Library Journal, they called him a contemporary Raskolnikov. And I kind of pictured like, this kid, his future is so bright that he's like, okay, anything I do to get through this moment is justified. Like, I'm gonna make it right someday. Just right now, I would do anything to just like not jeopardize this bright future, but cut corners and cheat along the way, and the ends justify the means and totally disintegrates his soul is what I kind of expect. But it
You're on
sounds
the right track.
incredibly compelling. So that one I might have to after this interview pick that up myself and
Oh, okay.
give that
Be
a
my
read on. It
guest.
sounds like right up my alley. I like those moral dilemma, because you have one type of story where the villain is external, and then you have one where like the hero and villain is inside the same character, and that's something I think all human beings can relate to. I mean, that is our story, right? Fundamentally. So I always love those kind of, and I mean the reviews are stunning. So I'm like, that looks like a lot of fun.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was a lot of fun because I got to play with those kinds of issues and this guy, his name's Jake, is he doesn't view himself as a bad person. He just wants to do what is best for him, and he's justifying things, and it's I had a lot of fun sort of trying to unpack his moral code
Mhm.
to the extent that it exists and play with it. And it raised a lot of issues for me when I was writing it. So that was fun too.
That's what I was going to ask you next. So I have one story where like I didn't understand my main character and I needed to. So I was like almost like got into like what I'll call method writing, like method acting, where like I need to be this character. And it was actually like difficult, right? So I'm wondering like to understand your protagonist, and he's also the villain in his own story, like to understand this person, did you feel like you had to kind of bring that home and live in his shoes a little bit?
I did, which was a little bit scary because when you read the book, some of the stuff that goes on is I will say up front, it's incredibly disturbing. And I actually reread it recently because I got the rights back, and I wanted to do it as an ebook. It was not an ebook when it was
Oh,
originally
interesting.
published. And as I was rereading it and kind of, doing another round of editing just to make sure, I was like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe that I'm the person who wrote this and that I was able to get in the head of this person. In fact, fun short story. I was dating my now wife at the time,
Mhm.
and she gave her a copy, and she was reading it. We were dating long distance, and she was reading it on the plane on the way to meet me.
Mhm.
And she told me later that she had serious reservations about whether she wanted to continue this relationship based on what she was reading. Now we're about to celebrate our 20th wedding anniversary next year,
Congratulations.
so yeah, thank you. So
Yeah.
she obviously got over whatever hurdle she had, but yeah, it's intense.
But to make beautiful art, I mean, you gotta embody it, right? And I don't know, I think there is an impact, right? Like I think of a painter like Caravaggio and made some of the greatest paintings of all time, but lost his mind and murdered a guy over a game of tennis and then died of paranoia and slept with a knife under his pillow. And but I was like, oh my, I don't know, to make great art, I feel like it does take a piece of you, and um, sometimes you have to embody the characters, and it goes deep, but hopefully we can make something beautiful out of, the worst elements of humanity or whatever it may be, right?
Sure. And I think there's also something cathartic about it, at least for me. I don't know about for you, but for me, when I write something so dark, it's not like it was in any I was in any danger of me doing these things, but
Mhm.
just getting that out of your system. And I'm a pretty chill, mellow guy. And so
Yeah.
I think it surprises a lot of people that I can write stuff that's pretty dark. But for me, getting it out, there's no need for me to be too stressed because it's all on the page.
Right, you can, yeah, take it out on the book, right? But I do
Exactly.
I do think, and a lot of my books they get pretty dark too, but you know, I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize what's within them, right? Like in a different context or circumstance, or like if the power went out tomorrow and the grocery store is empty 3 days later, like, would you be that kind neighbor who's going to share what you have, or are you going to be that person who's like, I will do anything I have to do? And I think most people are kind of blissfully unaware maybe of like what they're capable of. So I think it is important that art does confront, just the reality of like the best and worst of what human beings can be. Like if you know what you're capable of, you might have a choice in the matter, right? Like so
For
uh,
sure.
yeah. What do you find to be the most difficult part of writing? Like obviously you're a very prolific writer. Like do you struggle with the editing or do you not know when a book is done or what throws you off?
Um, I find the most daunting part for me is with my own stuff, of
Yeah.
course, is I know what I want to accomplish. You
Mm,
know, most of the time I know where I want this book to go and I have, big ambitions for what I want it to be. And sometimes, you're whether you're 50 pages in, 100 pages in, you're like, I'm not sure if I'm achieving that goal. Did I lose my way? Um,
right.
and and oftentimes you don't know until you're done whether you're on the path you want. And for me, that is kind of the biggest struggle is sort of maintaining that through line to where the reason I wrote the book in the first place. Am I still on
Right.
that path? And sometimes in the minutia of writing it and plotting it and dealing with sort of the interpersonal machinations among characters,
Mhm.
it's hard to see the forest for the trees. And so
Right.
I'm always sort of, am I still looking at the forest? That's, I'd say, my biggest challenge.
I find that incredibly relatable, almost too much so. So when you find the magic secret to get through that, please, send me an email, let me know. Do you like set an intention or anything when you write? Like just something that's like in your mind that's like, or do you storyboard anything like this that's like, okay, this is going to keep me on the path so I hit the mark at the end of this journey?
I do. I'll tell you, when I wrote my first book, which was not published, I it ended up I had just kind of a vague sense of what I wanted it to be, and so I wrote it. Ended up being the first draft ended up being almost 700 pages, and I haven't gone back and looked at that one in a while, but it definitely meandered. So for with every book after that, I've been pretty diligent about I will write an outline, not like a, point by point
Right.
methodical, take all the fun, squeeze all the juice out of it. But
Mhm.
I'll have, excuse me, maybe like a 5 page outline that will keep me on target. And there's a lot of room to play within that. I'll with characters, I'll maybe have names and the most basic description, but I like to allow a lot of room for the story to breathe and the characters to breathe. But I
Right.
definitely find that it's helpful after that first experience I had to have something I can refer back to, kind of to keep me sort of guardrails so that I don't go too far afield.
Right. 700 pages. It sounds like you had a ton to say, and it's like I waited too long, and I'm gonna get it all in this one book. Everything I've ever wanted to say is going in this one manuscript. Yep. Yep.
Yes.
So I'm sure. So it looks like right now, your most current, it's Furies Rising, which is book one. How big is the series going to be?
The plan right now is 3 books. That's how I have it. That's how I envision it. Although you never know, I have some like potential scenarios, offshoots if you see where the story takes you, obviously.
Right.
But right now I have it planned as a 3 book series.
Is that the current passion? Like you're working on book two? So you got book one, Hollow Valley, and then you're working on the sequel now, or part two, or
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I am actually what I am today finishing up the second draft of a ghostwriting book, and then I will set that aside. And I've been reviewing the outline for book two and starting on December 1st, I think, whatever the first Monday is after Thanksgiving.
yeah.
I'm diving into book two. So
Okay.
we're on the cusp. I'm very excited.
I love it. That's got to be incredibly exciting feeling. You're like, and I like that you have it organized. Like I have a date set that like I am going to sit down and this book we're going to start making it happen on this day.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, it is. I'm borderline giddy about it because I've been honing the outline and I've been waiting, because of the ghostwriting effort. I'm not one of those people who can write two things at once.
Right.
They bleed into each other. So I've just been waiting and like raring to go.
I got to get better with the focus, right? Like if I have two stories in mind, I'm like, no, 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 I got a task at hand, just one thing, and then when that's done, we'll set that in a box, do the next thing. I got to work on that
Well,
personally.
if you're able to do more than one at once, give me your secret because I can't do it.
I'm like the kind of guy, I feel like in so many ways I've switched over to marketing more than writing at this point. I'm like, okay, I gotta, I'm gonna make it make sense, and then I'm gonna start the next one. But I have so many stories like ready to go, and it's like they're bubbling up, and I might end up writing a 700-page book on accident because it's like I've just waited too long, man. Uh,
Well, maybe that'll be, your that'll be the one that wins the National Book Award or what have you. You've just
who
been waiting
knows,
for the
right?
right
I
moment.
mean, it's not gonna be one of the short ones. I'm definitely finding the short ones, like you make one point, you get in, you get out. I don't know, those ones where, those have done very well for me, but the big books where I'm like, I'm going to do everything, that gets a little bit like, might have done it a little too much. Might need to cut about 40,000 words out of this thing. Yeah.
Yeah, bit
Oh,
off a little more than you could chew. I know that
yeah.
feeling.
So do you want to talk about 2020 at all? I read the description and it seems like an incredibly complicated kind of political thriller.
It's funny. I wrote that around 2012, and so it was the basic premise of the book. I'll start there. Is It's about this kind of beach bum surfer guy in Southern California, which is where I live. I'm not a beach bum or a surfer. I couldn't surf to save my life, but he is just kind of leading this, chill life. He's a veteran, a Marine who's been injured, and he's kind of got a bit of an addiction issue as well. And but his brother is a U.S. senator who is about to be picked to be the vice presidential nominee for for a candidate. And without getting into too many details, um, the all of a sudden our hero's life gets complicated because of an assassination attempt, and all of a sudden some information that he has becomes crucial, and he ends up having to go on the run, and sort of the forces of the government are arrayed against him, and so he's sort of on the run and hiding and trying to figure out this sort of conspiracy while he's trying to survive. And so that's the premise. So it's funny when it was published. 2020 was like 8 years in the future, and
Right,
now
right. Now we're
now we're
looking
in the
back at
past.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd be curious to see. I actually haven't read it myself in a few years, so
Right.
I'd be curious to see just how prescient it was
Right.
in
If
the
anything's
moment.
lining up.
Yeah,
It seems like it does have this also like dystopian element to it. Like there's kind of this surveillance state, and like the federal government has kind of grown out of control, and they've kind of maybe become more like dictators than presidents. Like that's the impression I got, at least. That
that's right. Yes, there is that element. Yeah, it is sort of there is a dystopian world in the and yeah, there are definitely those elements. So, people can draw whatever conclusions they like based on that. I think you can read it, and if you want to, you can create some larger resonance out of it, or if you just want to read it as sort of a page turning, conspiracy thriller, you can read it either way. In fact, that's kind of what I like to do with a lot of my books. Is if you're looking for more, I can certainly tell you what I was after, or hopefully people will pick up on it themselves. But if people aren't interested in that and they just want a fun read, then they don't have to worry about that.
I kind of think that's like the mark of a great story, right? Is like it can kind of meet readers where they are. Like if you just want something that's entertaining and it's going to turn the pages, like we got that. But if you're looking for something deeper, there are layers to this thing. There's a lot that can be analyzed, and even revisiting the same book later, you're going to discover totally different things in a different season of your life. That's
That's
to me
the
the
hope.
hallmark of a great book. So sounds like it's got a lot going for it for sure. Who
Thank
were
you.
your literary inspirations? I have a feeling we may have some overlap here just based on kind of what you like to write. So I'm curious. I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are the literary classics that I would aspire to, but I don't have any pretensions of ever achieving. I love books like Great Gatsby, Sun Also Rises,
Yeah, yeah.
Wuthering Heights. But in terms of stuff that like speaks to me personally when I'm writing, I am a big fan of I love Scott Smith, who did Simple Plan and The Ruins. I'm a big Patricia Highsmith fan. Um, I and the Ripley novels. I really loved Donna Tartt, Secret History. A lot of these books that we've been talking about, where there's sort of an element of moral gray, and you as a reader are having to wrestle with how you feel about the characters and sort of wrestle with your own morality as
Right.
you're reading, and but hopefully still having a good time as you're reading. So
Yeah, but yeah, having that kind of conflict within the reader too, that like, hey, this person's a villain, but I kind of want him to win, and how would I navigate that? And playing with that gray area, which people are not good at. I kind of found people like things very black and white. They like in real life, they want really simple stories, whether it's in politics or just looking at the past to just I want the most simple explanation for what's happening here. And I think as artists we need to play around in the gray to be like, look, the world is there is right and wrong at the core of things, but there's a lot of gray in between, right? There's an infinite amount of understanding we can have for people, but there's also like, hey, some things are just right, some things are just wrong. And yeah, I got a little carried away there, but
no, no,
I feel
I
you.
agree. I mean, that's what's fascinating. I mean, none of us is all good or all bad, and so trying to play with that as an artist is rewarding. And I think in life we'd all be a little better off if we could remember that about each other and maybe offer folks a little bit of grace when they screw up and maybe not too much when they go, beyond the pale.
I think about, I come across this a lot, right? Like someone behaves in a strange way, and you're like, well, you look at maybe their family life and the childhood was rough, and you're like, oh, I have a lot of sympathy. And then you're also like, wait, you're 30 years old, or you're 35, or you're 40, and it's like, you're the adult in the room now, right? And it is tricky to be like, like there's a lot of gray and there's a lot of explanation for why you are the way you are, but it's also like, you are an empowered adult who has free will, who is choosing. So I think as artists, it's good we play with that. It's also good, I think we wrestle with that and we put it on the paper for people. I think we can all understand each other a little better and maybe even help refine our own moral compass, right?
Sure.
So I'm sure more than anything is Furies Rising has to be what you're most enthusiastic about right now. Just getting into book two, that's got to be the current passion, correct?
Yes, yes, I'm quite pumped.
Is there anything you want to say about book one? So I got the impression almost like a zombie thing, but it sounds like okay, so there was a virus and 9 out of 10 people are immediately out of the picture, and there's a certain percentage. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, you're definitely on the right track. Yeah. So yeah, the basic premise is there's this rage virus, almost imagine like a 28 days later type situation.
Rabies or something
Ye-
like this that like mad dog,
Correct.
yeah.
And it kills off a huge section of the population, and so the vast majority of the population either dies or becomes what I call furies. So they're like zombie adjacent. It's not, like rise from the dead and that sort of
Like
thing.
the
But
cranberries or something. They're like just horribly violent, not thinking clearly, and they're
ex
no resemblance of their former self, but they didn't die or something. They're not rotting.
correct.
Yeah.
Exactly. And they're yeah. And they're not like trying to eat brains, but they will chew you up if they get a
If they get
hold
a
of you.
hold of you, they're yeah.
So yeah, that's sort of the basic premise. But what kind of distinguished this one for me was um, it's my first young adult book. I had never written one before, and my
Okay.
daughters, I have two daughters, told me that they were not upset, but they were frustrated that they couldn't read anything else that I had written based on obviously the descriptions of some of that other stuff. So they asked me to write a book that they could read, and
Nice.
so that was sort of the challenge that I took up for myself um, when I wrote that. So this one is not. I mean, there's definitely moral gray, but
Right.
because of the nature of it, it's not. It's not. It's not. Even though there are zombie-like creatures in it and tons of people die, I would say oddly it's not as dark as my first book.
Right. It's not like particularly violent. Or you don't maybe dwell on those worst elements that just they happen, but we're not going to like linger and tell you everything about them, right?
Right. I mean, there is violence, but it's tempered to a degree. But I didn't want to soft pedal it. I kind of the way I wrote it was these are young characters. They're teenagers. It takes place at a summer camp when this virus breaks out, and
Mm.
they're sort of temporarily isolated from it. What happens? So these are younger characters, but I wanted to sort of write it as if it was just an adult book with some minor differences, allowing for the age and not condescend to either the characters or the readers when I was writing it.
It's an interesting framework, and definitely, I mean, I appreciate that challenge, and I appreciate that your daughters want to read it. I hear this all the time from indie authors. You're like, you publish your first book, and you're so excited, it means the world to you, and then like your own sibling won't read it, and you're like, okay, I thought maybe I'd have a community behind me, but you're like, kind of. But it's amazing. Your daughter's like, we want to read your stuff, and you're like, whoa, put that book away. Okay, I'm gonna make a new one. That's like it's good for today. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I will acknowledge that when I started it, they were a little bit younger.
Mhm.
Now they're a little older, and I don't know if either of them have finished it, but if I were to press them on the issue, that would be counterproductive. So I'm just letting it lie.
Well, the fact that they think it's cool, that's like a cool thing, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's pretty awesome. That support is awesome.
thank
Well, let
you.
me ask you, when you go to write your own stuff, does it take you longer than when you're ghostwriting?
Absolutely. For one thing, when I'm ghostwriting, I have, these imposed deadlines from them. So I will say that for me, this may sound a little crazy, but from start to finish, a ghostwriting project takes about 2 months,
No kidding.
which, yeah, for a book that's in the neighborhood of 200 to 225 pages. When
Okay.
I'm writing my own books, it absolutely takes longer. With Furies, I want to say, um, 8 or 9 edits, and it took over a year to before I was satisfied with it. And with uh, the other book that I wrote after Furies, but before which we haven't discussed, but that one, which is another adult book. I would say it was 18 months that so definitely the short version is yes, a lot longer.
Yeah. When you're ghostwriting, do you have to do like a bunch of different like drafts and edits, or is it like just kind of one big run through and one check or?
Basically, I do my draft, the first draft, then I write, or then I do a second draft, which is the one that I am completing today. After we finish talking, I'm
Okay.
going to wrap it up, and
Yeah.
I give it actually to my wife, who is my copy editor,
No
and
kidding.
she gives me her notes, and then I do a third draft. And then I submit that one to the folks I work for, and they give me their notes, and then I take those notes and I do one final draft. So typically 4 drafts for ghostwriting.
That's amazing. Your wife's the copy editor too. You got like yeah, it's like I don't know, like a factory or something, but like just within the house, and then maybe the kids are like punching holes in the thing and binding the book, and you're just like the whole family's in on it, right? And we just
We've
crank
got
these
a
books
whole
out.
system going.
We got a
Yeah.
whole system. The dog delivers them. Um, that's pretty cool. I will say that is pretty cool.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate it, and I'm terrible with copy editing, so it's great to have her, and she doesn't charge that much, so that's nice too.
All in favor sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, there you
I'll cut
go.
you a deal. Well, let me ask you. So, you are of the indie authors I've come across, and I don't want to call you. Actually, I want to ask you this first. So, your first book, Darkness in Him, you published traditionally, but now from this point, you're choosing to self-publish.
Yes, I will say that it was not entirely up to me. The first book I was traditionally published, and to be frank, it just didn't do that well, and
Hmm.
it didn't earn back the advance, and so had it done better, I probably would have continued to
Done
publish
anyway.
traditionally. You know, it's obviously a lot less, as you well know, it's a lot less legwork. I mean, it's still legwork, but in terms of like promotion and marketing, you know as well as I do, it's a different animal.
Yeah.
So
I have heard with the traditional publishing that like 4 out of 5 books, even among the biggest publishers, never make the advance. They never get that back. So it's like, I know a lot of authors, they're so inspired to write, and you spend 6 months like querying agents and figuring out which publishers will even talk to an author. And you do all this, and I mean, 4 out of 5 are still gonna flop. So I was like,
yeah,
yeah, my first two I went with like a hybrid publisher kind of thing, and then I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna do this myself, win, lose, or draw. It's going to be on me 100%. So it's interesting that you came to the same conclusion.
hmm
And that's kind of, I think it is the way to go. But obviously, like, there's quite a mountain to climb, but you get a lot of freedom to do so, right? I mean, you pick in your pricing, you market the way you see fit.
absolutely. Yeah, you can do. Yeah, you're not beholden to anyone other than yourself, and readers, and I do like that freedom, and it definitely allows allows you to sort of pick and choose in terms of how you want to promote the book. You're not beholden on that front either, and
Mhm.
it's definitely more challenging than legwork. I spend a lot more time, and I know you do as well, promoting than I would otherwise, and that's almost like a third job. But
You wear a lot of
so
hats when you publish it yourself. You're like,
for
I am
sure.
writer, editor, publisher, marketer. I'm all the things, right? I'm the email blast guy. But it is rewarding when it is successful. It's a rewarding feeling. You're like, you know what? This is a house I built from scratch, and it started with an idea in my head, and now like it's got a life of its own, and this book has momentum, and it's got a world, and people are talking about it, recommending it. It is a tremendous feeling, but it is very difficult to do. But for any authors listening to this, not impossible to do, just very difficult to do, but it can certainly be done. So I do want to ask you because of all the indie authors I've come across, and I'm calling you an indie author, even though you're really both and you're a lot of things. You are, I think, the only one I've met so far who has very successfully carved out a real full-time career in writing. So, what advice do you have for the next generation of authors? Anyone who's listening to this who's like, hey, I'm maybe working on my first, or my first just came out, or like I have a dream about doing this. What would you tell them?
Um, I would say that if this is what you really want to do, just do it. I know that sounds like a cliche, but if you have a passion for it, that's the most important thing, and not to let setbacks set you back. I will say that when I first started doing this, I was getting up at 4 in the morning and writing before my regular job, and I was writing 8, 9 hours on the weekends and 2.5 hours in the mornings because that's the only time I could do it. And some
Right.
mornings I would get up at 4 and it was cold and I didn't sleep that well the night before. And I'd be like, I just want to roll over. And then I thought, no, this is my passion. This is what I want to be. I want to be, I may right now have a different title. I may have a different job, but I want to be a writer. And if that's what you want, then you got to hold fast to it and not let folks who might dissuade you, not let that voice inside you that might dissuade you from time to time. I mean, that's going to happen, and you kind of have to acknowledge it and wrestle with that. But if you believe this is what you want to do, then whether you're 20, 40, 60, 80, do it because as you mentioned, it can be done now independently. And if that's what you care about, then you should do it. And I think that I would just say just don't lose the passion. As long as you have the passion, that will sustain you. on those challenging days when you're looking at a blank page and you feel like it's just not coming together. And some days, you know, it may not come together, and you may have to set it aside and come back. But just like believe in the reason that you started this in the first place.
I gotta tell you, that was really solid. Like I want to re-listen to that. I'm like getting hyped up. I want to write something. I'm like, you know what? Like, I've been dragging my feet. I'm ready to get typing here. It's funny you say that, like when I was writing my first couple ones too, it's like I was fighting for the dream too. It was like 4 a.m., 5 a.m. It's like before the phone rings, before the emails come in, before spouse wakes up, kid wakes up, dog wakes up, whatever it is. Like those quiet hours, you do your best writing, but trying to like bank on it at like 6, 7 p.m. when it's like, oh, we got to cook dinner and oh, we got to do the dishes and oh, like you just already did a full day of work elsewhere. You're like, I don't have it in me. But that 4 a.m., 5 a.m. slot, my best writing for sure.
Totally agree. It's like working out. To me, like if I don't do it early, there's no guarantee I'm going to
It
do
might
it.
not happen, right? But
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I always, oh God, those people who work out at 4 a.m. I'm like, it would be dangerous to me. Like I am so off balance. Like I'm like, I'm gonna hurt myself if I even try. But I can sit at a keyboard, but I'm not ready to lift anything heavy at 4 a.m. So I know Zoom is going to kick us out pretty shortly here. We got about 3 minutes, it looks like, and I am going to upgrade this for anyone listening. Just starting out, we got the free one, and I'm ready to go. Where should people find you, follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can go to my website, andrewlyonsbooks.com, where you can buy any of the books that we've discussed. You can find me on TikTok at Andrew Lyons Books, Instagram, same. I'm on Blue Sky as well, although I don't remember my handle right now. But
Probably similar, close.
yeah,
Oh
something
yeah,
similar to that. So you can find me all those places.
nice. One thing I do love about the indie author thing is we are accessible. So, Andrew and I were able to get together, get this going, but he and I are both going to hit it big, and we're going to get a lot of emails. So I'd reach out to us now because right now well, we're always going to love connecting with readers. I love hearing feedback. I love talking to people who read the books. But one cool thing about indie authors is that you can reach out to us, you can ask us things, you can pick our brain about writing. I know Andrew is going to be an amazing resource because I mean you have a ton of experience, and everything you just said, I was like, yes, I don't know. There's like something I need to like fall asleep listening to that. Like just get me hyped up and inspired, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions people might have. I love the feedback, just like you do.
Wonderful. And definitely check out his books, Furies Rising. Gonna start working on the sequel soon. So you gotta read the first one before the second one comes out. Darkness in Him sounds like it goes deep. Probably a good one for the winter, right? You're like cozy and tucked in, you got the fireplace going, you're like, oh, we're gonna get into something dark here. So
Absolutely.
definitely check out his books. And yeah, if you ever want to do this again, I enjoyed this conversation. When I upgrade the system, we'll be able to actually do an extended, chat, and we'll keep it going, man.
For sure. Thank you so much for doing this. This is a real service you're providing, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
No, it's a great honor just to talk to interesting, extraordinary people. So I want to know what makes you tick, and it was awesome to learn from you here. So I appreciate the time very much.
No problem. Thank you. Thanks for
Excellent.
having me.
Thank you very much. We'll see you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.